Virtual summits are the most powerful online marketing tool available to grow your list, launch your platform, make more money, and create an impact in the world, even if you're just getting started. If you are ready to take your summit to the next level, then tune into the Virtual Summit podcast with Dr. Mark T. Wade.
Hi, I'm Dr. Mark T. Wade, founder of Virtual Summit Software and creator of the One Day Summit Formula. And I'm on a mission to help you, the summit host, get your summit out to the world in a powerful and impactful way. So let's get started. Hey, Summit host, Dr. Mark T. Wade here, founder of Virtual Summit Software and your host on the Virtual Summit podcast. And oh my God, am I excited for this episode. And it's not just because our legendary guest has a beautiful last name. It is because we have some exciting and incredible information for you. And I'm not joking. I am literally chomping at the bit for legendary Francis Wade. Thanks for taking time to be here with us, Francis.
Anything for cousins.
Anything for cousins. Legendary Francis Wade being here with us because he has done some incredible things in the summit space, and I cannot wait to share this. And we are somehow, some way related for sure, but you're going to realize Francis over here has a much, much sexier accent over there in Jamaica. Now, Francis, before we jump into all of this amazing goodness we're going to talk about in the summit space, I would love for you to just take a couple seconds and let our audience know just a little bit more about you.
Sure. People don't believe me when I tell them that I was born in Cape Cod, but it's true. So I was born on the Cape. Parents came back to Jamaica, lived here through high school, went back to do university at Cornell, and then spent 20 years living in New York and Florida, and then came back again to Jamaica in 2005, and that's where I am right now.
And tell us a little bit about your background too, and you're in the business space, all the things you've done, because this is going to paint the picture for what we're about to dive deep into.
That's quite true. So I was trained as an engineer, and I became a management consultant right out of engineering school, working for a couple other companies. Started my own company in '93. We focus mostly on productivity in terms of time-based productivity, what people call time management. We have a special twist on it, written a couple books on it, and the summit that I have coming up in March is all about time blocking, which is about putting tasks in your calendar. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm a management consultant and serve clients mostly here in the Caribbean.
And I mean, you are an avid fan of the podcast from what I hear, right?
I am embarrassed to say that I'm up to November.
So you've been binging on some of the episodes, and I've been over here loving every second of it. I feel honored. And honestly, like when I hear that kind of information, Francis, it gets me even more excited to be doing this, and to have somebody as cool as you on here with us is even more phenomenal. So what we're going to do here is we're going to be coming at this from the aspect of a summit organizer, because you were helping a summit last year, and you did some pretty cool things with it. So before we jump into the details of all the specifics we're going to talk about of what you did with it, give us a little bit of an overview of what the actual summit was and what was the purpose of the summit.
Sure. It was the Productivity Summit, so it was right in line with my interests. It had 4 tracks, and I headed up the productivity track, but it had a track for technology, organizing, and for new business, for supporting small businesses. So it attracted an audience of about 6,000 or so, all the way around the world. And it had many of the features of you would expect in the usual summit. It had an all-access pass, but all of the videos were live. So it was totally live broadcast through Zoom, YouTube, and it was extremely engaging. I'll say that as a teaser, because I hadn't heard of you before we did that summit, but now having listened to you since October, many of the principles that you enforce over and over again during your podcast, we tried to do them on our own without really knowing and just kind of using a hunch. But no, they make sense, because pretty much you've validated many of them, if not all.
Calling all summit hosts. I want you to join me and my tribe of Summit All-Stars at our in-person conference called Summit Fest Live.
where you'll walk away with implementable strategies to rock out your summit, increase your revenues, and make connections that will last a lifetime. Come join us in New Orleans and let the good times roll. Get more information at summitfestlive.com.
I love that. Well, look, we're going to get into this because what you've, in our pre-interview chat, we've talked about some of the context and some of the things you did with this summit, which are just super cool. It's got me inspired and looking forward to see your next summit that's going to be coming out in March. But actually, let's kind of jump into that. Let's talk about like one of the top aspects here when you're creating a summit now and what you've kind of did even at that point. How you look at it if you're going to put your time and your energy into creating something like a summit, what is your goal? What are you wanting to happen for this audience?
That's a great question, because before I listened to your podcast, the summits I'd been on maybe 8 to 10 or so. They were all, if they weren't pre-recorded, it didn't matter if they were recorded or not actually, but they were all kind of me talking and not much happening other than that. As a speaker, I talked, I gave, and then I went away, and it was over. And that was it. And maybe I got a couple of questions from somebody who was listening in, but mostly it was a little bit of a slam bam, thank you, ma'am. And then it was all over. So the experience I had, I got some exposure, and it was interesting. But the experience I had was that this is really more about just filling a slot than it is what you talk about, which is causing a transformation. So if you're really out to produce this mission of transforming the life of a listener or an attendee or what we call a summiteer, if you're out to transform a summiteer, then it sort of calls for a slightly different approach. So when we started conceiving of the Productivity Summit 2 years before it happened, I had this in mind that, the slam bam, thank you, ma'am, it's beneficial. You can get a lot of value from it, but it in my mind, it left a lot of value on the table. You could do so much more, but could the technology provide for it? I didn't think the technology was there at the time. And I'll tell you how we did it, but we had to sort of kludge together different technologies to provide this transformational effect.
And I love that, like the transformation. And in our pre-interview chat, you were actually talking, like there was, when the person comes, you have a philosophy on
right.
What needs to happen with this audience. So let's go into the audience. Right. What has to happen for the audience that makes what you've done with this first summit different than what the other summits are that are out there?
Right. So I have a transformation background. I led transformation programs for a leading company in the world. So I know something about the topic. And people come into an event, let's just say an event, any old event, and they leave at the end. And if it's transformational, their whole way of being is very different. So during the 2 days, 3 days, 5 days, or whatever, they've done more than just absorb information. They are thinking differently. They're feeling differently. And there are certain things that have to happen during the event for that to take place, or that can accelerate it. One of them is that they have prolonged interaction with the speaker. So they have, especially for introverts, they hear someone speak. They may not put together their questions fast enough to fit into the Q&A. So an hour later, they're like, oh man, I wish I could talk to them. I wish I could ask them some more, because now that I've thought about it, I realized I didn't understand this part. So that prolonged interaction is one key that can make it transformational. The other is that you have interactions with people who are in the summit. So anybody who knows anything about adult learning, a big key in adult learning is that you learn as much or more from the other people who are learning with you as you do from the person who is doing the teaching. So the summits I'd been on hadn't had any kind of cross-participant or cross-summiteer interaction. And as a result, it lessened the transformational impact. They were more informational than transformational as a result. Because then the person was just listening, but then you couldn't talk to someone and say, did you catch that? What did he mean when he said that? When I tried that, it didn't work. How about when you tried that? Those are the conversations, the peer-to-peer conversations between people that really make it transformational, according to the practice and the theory. So the question that we had was, how in the world do you put together a summit and have all of these elements? So we started with that problem because we kind of knew we wanted it to be transformational. We kind of knew we wanted to take them on a journey, similar to what you described in the summit arc. We wanted to take them through this journey throughout the days. We just didn't think there was a technology that would allow that to happen. So we were, matter of fact, it took 2 years because in the first year, it was like, there is no technology that allows for that. So we never really got to the planning stage. It got put off until the following year, and we had a bit of luck in discovering the technology.
Absolutely. And I love this peer-to-peer conversation, cross-participation, and transformation. I mean, that is what summits have to get to. It can no longer be, as we've said, just information. It can't just be education. Like, people want to be, there's so much information, there's so much education that now people can be picky enough and say, I want to be entertained too, or I want to have this sort of transformation. And as you just said, Francis, most transformations don't happen in a passive state, right? Me just sitting here listening to a screen. I've got to have something. And so I love this. So let's keep diving into this. Sure. So you started to put it together, and what did you start to end up with?
So the technology didn't exist as far as we could find. We searched for it and kind of gave up because we couldn't find it. But fortunately, we ran into a network, Mighty Networks, which is a community platform. It's a bit similar if your listeners are familiar with vanilla forums. There are a few of them floating around out there, but this one has a great price point, and it allowed us to actually create a community before the summit. So instead of the summit being the kickoff to the community was a kickoff to the summit. So it already existed. There were already there's already a base of people who were, who couldn't wait for the summit to start because they didn't even know about the summit when the community was started. But
let's pick this apart right here,
sure.
Francis. This is genius. So what were some of the tactics? So you used this on the Mighty Network, but what were some of the tactics you did to actually start creating the community and getting them excited for the summit before it ever happened?
Well, here's the secret. Mighty Networks now allows you to create a platform for free. For now, that wasn't the way it was a year ago when I started my platforms. I have a couple of them that I'm running. So anyone can go on Mighty Networks and set up a platform, send out email to their list, or go to anywhere where there are people who are interested in the topic. And 3 months ahead of time, a year ahead of time, however, whatever time works for you, start to have conversations with, it's free. Mark, it's free. Did I say that this amazing technology actually no cost? It's amazing to me because I had to pay for it. But no, you can actually do it for free. And you can create this and start to have the conversations that then lead up to the summit. So while you're planning for your summit, which is an intense activity by itself, you can have this platform running in the background in which people are being attracted to it. They're talking about the topics that you're going to do in the summit anyway, and they're sort of your base. And then when the summit comes along, the summit is actually held inside the network. This is how we did it. No, the network is not built for summits. I want to be clear. This is like, as you said, bootstrapping. This is going back to the days where you had to pull together all these different technologies, and there's some pain involved because the platform is not built for summits. However, you can do the community side of it, and you can have the pages set up inside of the platform. As a matter of fact, there's probably a way to combine the platform with the virtual summit platform, right? With your service, there's probably a nice way to bring them together. I could see that working because the hosting and all of the activity that happens in the broadcasting, all of that could take place on your platform. But the communication between the participants and between the speaker and the participants takes place on the platform. So that's probably, when I'm talking to you,
yeah,
I think there's a way to have your cake and eat
it too. A note written down here with a big star next to it for my team to go check out integration opportunities with that. I love this. So, and this is an amazing concept of creating community before you even start the summit. So what were some of the ways you got the conversation started? What were some of the ways you put the topic out there maybe? I mean, was it just as straight as asking questions or what were some of the ways?
Sure. Sharing content, asking questions, putting up, I did a speech 4 months before the conference, and the speech was put on the platform. and people were able to interact with it. It was also put on YouTube, but it gave an idea of what was coming in the conference, because the presentation I made in the conference was built on the speech that I gave several months prior. So I can't say that it was all like genius planning. It was luck. It was just so happened to be that this is how it worked out. And looking back, it looks like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. But it was more a case of loving. I'll tell you the truth. It's loving transformation. If you love transformation, then you want to get people who are talking to each other so that they're transforming themselves around the subject. It's not hard once you have a genuine love and a mission for what you do. It actually makes it really easy because it's a natural outgrowth of who you are and what you're doing. It's one message. All it is, as you said, you said it many times, summits are for relationship building. The profits really come once the relationships are built. Well, in a way, what I'm saying, I guess, is that the community building before the summit is a way to start building relationships slowly so they build up to the summit. The summit is a way to have a mega event that brings together way more than the people who are in the community, but it brings together a mega audience. And the two work well together. The one leads into the other and gives you the opportunity to have this very short, tight transformational effect in a short space of time.
Be sure to check out the speaker management tool inside your virtual summit software, which lets you quickly and easily recruit and manage your speakers on your virtual summit, literally eliminating hundreds of hours of work. Get more information at virtualsummits.com.
So when you were talking with the audience, as they're going through the summit, what was kind of some of the feedback they were saying as far as the transformation? And what were some of the things that they were loving the most that we may be able to implement or kind of model into our own summits?
Sure. One of the things that we did was to have a live, I'm not sure how to describe it, but it was a live Zoom room. So Zoom now has the capability of breaking down into sub-rooms or subgroups, breakout rooms. So you can bring together everyone in your summit into one space. I'm going to be doing this in March, as you could imagine, and address everyone who is in the summit the way you would a plenary session in a conference, right? Except that everybody's online. Then you can break them out and have them go have separate conversations depending on their area of interest. So now they're talking to people that they're really interested with, on topics that they're really interested in. They talk for however long as you want, maybe half an hour, 10 minutes, whatever. You bring them back together in a plenary session. So you're now almost guiding them through. They don't know it's transformational, but if you look at the principles of causing a transformational, this is how you do it. You vary between large groups, small groups, large groups, and you stick to the topics that people really want to talk about the most. By the way, I'm saying it like it's not been said before, but I was inspired greatly by your Summit Story arc. So the Summit Story arc, and I know it comes in part from the Hero's Journey this might sound a little bit like theory, but the Hero's Journey was, what's the name of the author again? I forget the name of he wrote Joseph Campbell, right? So and it was embedded in Star Wars and other places. So the Summit Story arc, and I the minute I heard that, I went looking for it on your website, and I couldn't find it. I had to listen to the podcast and then write down everything you said. It was one of those transcriptions. But essentially what you say is that people come into a summit in a particular space. They go through a journey that is essentially the hero's journey, but it's the underlying journey that every successful novel or movie follows. Some people call it a 3-act structure. But I happen to have written a novel, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, a productivity novel about a guy who has a hard time with his productivity and how he gets better. It's called Bill's Imperfect Time Management Adventure. But anyway, it was written, and I had to go figure out what a novel is because I'd never written a novel before. So I had to go research it and find out what is this story arc business. So what I did was, for my next summit anyway, I combined what you say about the Summit Story arc with what I had learned before And I wrote out this whole journey of ups and downs. The whole idea is that you tell your audience, you need to go up and down with the emotions and have challenges and failures and last minute reprieves, and person needs to win at the end. And there's a established way to describe a story. Take that to the transformational world, and it's the same idea. It's just said differently, because the most exciting stories are in fact transformational, right? They're the ones where the person ends up different at the end. So take them all together and you have, okay, a summit is a multi-day version of producing a transformation in which you need to very carefully assess the frame of mind people are coming in with, figure out the frame of mind you want them to end up with, and all the changes you want them to go through. And in the middle, okay, how do I structure the activities? And how do I sequence? This is what you talk about. How do I sequence the sessions so that they go through this transformational journey together? Now that is amazing stuff. And big credit to you for coming up with the link between the two, because there's no way I would have even figured that out if I hadn't talked to you.
Well, I really appreciate that, Francis. I mean, it is. And by creating that, you create a transformation. You're evolving. We're all evolving. And, the fact that you're implementing it, the credit goes right back to you. I can talk about it. And there's a lot of people that have heard the story or heard about the Summit Story Arc that are still not implementing it. So to see you actually, writing that all out, making that happen, that's a huge, huge credit to yourself. And, as we start to now, kind of round out this episode, I want to talk even more about one of the other amazing things that you did on the last summit. And you had a perfect way of saying this, and I'm going to let you explain it, but the difference between a fair and a circus. Take us through that.
Right. So this also has a transformational element to it, because people go through a cycle of emotions during a transformational event, and it happens on a summit as well. But it also happens when you go to the circus. So when you go to the circus, the experience is of sitting in a 3-ring set of activities. It's dark. You're not really talking to the person next to you, but you have you're entertained for that period of time, and then you leave. So in terms of maximizing revenue, let's just be very clear about that. There's only one opportunity to make revenue. You pay for the ticket to go to the 3-ring circus. Contrast that with a fair or a circus that has sideshows. So what circuses figured out from fairs, from what I understand from the little research I did on this topic before this call, they decided that we want to keep people. I want to keep people so that, we can make more revenue. So what they do is they create all these sideshows in addition to the main event, and they're intended to keep you there longer and have you spend money on games of chance and on games of skill. And, you're actually now doing something. So you're active as opposed to just passive. So when you're in the big top with the 3 rings, you are passive. Now that you're in the fair, the activities and the sideshow, you're now active. You're now using your brain. How many jelly beans are in the jar? You're now throwing a ball in the hoop. You're doing all these things that require some skill and some chance. And they're entertaining and interesting. Okay, so what does it have to do with summits? Well, I had the thought, why do most summits, and this was 2 years ago, just dismiss the learners or the summiteers, and once they're done, they say goodbye? Why don't they create a space for them to do something? So part of that something is the community platform for them to talk to each other. But then I had the thought, all these interactives. So I spent probably a decade working on different interactives, online interactives, like quizzes and assessments and different scenario-driven games, and anything you can do online in which you have to do something and you get a variable response based on your actions that you take. So I've been creating them for the last 10 years. They've been a bit of a side hobby because I put them in my training. People enjoy them and they love, make it turn into a competition. They love them. And I said, okay, how can that be done in a summit? So for the summit in October, we created a game room. And I naively thought, oh man, there's going to be all these people who are creating the kind of games we could use in a productivity summit. Well, I was a little bit ahead of my time. Turns out maybe 3/4 of the games came from me because I literally just couldn't find people who were niching down that far. Lots of game creators, but they weren't creating games for the productivity niche. So didn't find as many as I wanted, but still we had about 10 games. But from a monetization point of view, they were free. But what they do is they give people something to do in the downtime. They also give people something to do if they are in a different time zone. So it allows you to create this story arc. Back to what you said, your agenda can say, okay, for this part, we recommend that you listen to 3 or 4 sessions back to back. Then we recommend that you take a break. And during the break, you can go to the game room. You could also go to visit the exhibitors if you have exhibitors as well. Or you could take some time off, go have lunch, but allow the thoughts that you've had to seep in. And then when you come back in, so you can actually have someone program their time during the 3, 4, 5 days so that they need to get work done. They need to check email. So let's be real. I've listened to summits where I was listening, but I was really checking email. So I really didn't listen all that deeply. So at the beginning of the summit, of the summit coming up, I'm actually giving people a workbook. And in that workbook, I'm saying, okay, for the next 3 days, you need to create an agenda that includes everything, including summit stuff, email, downtime, and in the summit stuff, there's sessions, exhibits, and games, and interacting with people online live, either textually through chat rooms or in the Zoom room where you can attend one of the video sessions where I have one of the speakers come in and do a Q&A live. Because in my summit, they're all pre-recorded. So the only live video would be the Q&As. So the person sort of sits down and says, okay, how can I get the most from the next 3 days? They don't understand that there's an arc. They don't know that it's transformational necessarily, but I'm trying to make them get the biggest bang for their buck by basically guiding them through the summit story arc that you describe.
With the Ever Summit feature inside the Virtual Summit software, you can rerun your summit as if it were live, ongoing forever with one click of a button. This now lets you continue to use your summit forever, bringing in qualified and engaged leads every month into your business. Get more information at virtualsummit.com.
That's just pure genius right there in a game room. And I never heard that concept as well. As I mean, obviously it's so clear now. It's like the difference between a circus and a fair. The longer you can keep them there, which, I mean, if we're talking about it from a fair standpoint, is obviously they're playing more games, they're spending more money, increases revenue. But from a summit standpoint, the longer you have them there, the more they're engaged, the more engaged they are. Afterwards increases revenue. I mean, this is really good. And I've already said, even in our pre-interview chat before we got into the specifics of these, Francis, you got my mind going. I definitely am going to be picking your mind more frequently on these as well. And we're going to have to wrap this episode up here shortly, but I just have to say thank you again so much for one, hanging out and sharing these wisdoms with us, the transparencies and all these amazing resources that you've learned. And I know that our other listeners right now, the other summit hosts are going, thank you, Francis. Now, where can I go find you? How can I pick your brain? How can I, get some more information from you? So why don't you share where you're hanging out at and the best places people can get in touch with you with?
Sure. My book is called Perfect Time-Based Productivity. And I love talking about productivity as that's my bread and butter. And my website that's mostly geared towards the work I'm doing now is scheduleu.org, www.scheduleu.org. And it's the one that's sort of hosting, but promoting the summit that I have coming up. And it's the one where folks could see the most activity.
Incredible. So we'll get all of these links and everything else you've talked about, because there's so many different resources that you've mentioned here. We'll get all of those on the show notes over at podcast.virtualsummits.com/116 so that everybody can go over there and get access to you, Francis. And I'm going to have you kind of wrap us up here. I'm going to let you kind of give one final parting piece of wisdom that you think the summit hosts need to know.
So this may sound I don't know, flattering, but listen to Mark. That's what I would say, because the only reason I can explain all that I did today in the way I did is because you explained so much of what summits are about. You explained the background, and it explained to me why we did what we did back in October, why I didn't like the ones I'd presented at before. You gave the explanation that made sense to me, and putting it all together, really all I've really come here to do is put together many of the thoughts that you have shared on your podcast. So listen to Mark. Does that qualify?
Oh, Francis, I appreciate that. I'm honored. I take that. I accept that. And I appreciate you as well. So thank you again so much for sharing this insight with our audience.
You're welcome. Pleasure.
And thank you, all you Summit hosts, for spending this time with Frances and I. I'm Dr. Mark T. Wade, your host here on the Virtual Summit podcast. And remember, your message matters. So go out there and make an impact in the world. Don't forget to check out all of these amazing, incredible resources that Francis has just shared with us over in the show notes at podcast.virtualsummits.com/116. And we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening. Now don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on the Virtual Summit podcast. Head over to the show notes to check out all the links and resources from this episode, and be sure to grab your free trial of the Virtual Summit software.
Now, I want to end this episode by saying to all the Summit hosts listening right now, I believe in you, and you can do this. Summits are by far one of the most powerful ways to quickly grow your list, launch your platform, make more money, and most importantly, make an impact in the world, even if you're just getting started. So don't get caught up in analysis paralysis, because the world needs to hear your message, and there are people who are waiting for you to help them. So just get started, because imperfect action is always better than no action. Thank you, and see you on the next episode.